It's time for Around the Ozarks Sports Scene, brought to you by Fast Break Sports, the largest selection of cards and card supplies in Southwest Missouri. Now here's your host, Scott Puryear.
Welcome in to another edition of Around the Ozarks Sports Scene. I am Scott Puryear. As always, appreciate you taking time to listen to the podcast. We're going to talk a lot of Cardinals baseball with one of our favorite guests, Rob Raines. He's a Springfield native, Kickapoo grad who runs stlsportspage.com, and a longtime journalist, has written 33 books in his career, mostly on baseball, and love catching up with Rob because he's there every night and kind of sees the inner workings of the Cardinals, and, you know, not been real promising here in the first part of the season. They have got a little hotter here of late, so we'll talk to Rob and get his thoughts on that. But first, we start off each week with our Look Ahead segment, kind of giving you a preview of what we're watching this week in the local and regional world of sports. Of course, Memorial Day weekend coming up, so there'll be lots of car races and things of that nature. But in terms of baseball and the local scene, Missouri State Bears are out in the Missouri Valley Conference Tournament in Evansville, Indiana. They enter as the 8th seed in an 8-team field. They were playing Illinois-Chicago on Tuesday as we taped the podcast, and not been the season that the Bears had anticipated. They went into the tournament 23-32 overall, 11-16 in the Missouri Valley. They did have a nice send-off for Keith Gutton on Saturday at Hammonds Field with Keith Gutton Day. Really well done, and a nice tribute with more than 100 of his former players coming back to honor a guy who 42-year head coaching career, which I doubt you'll see that anymore going forward from any school, a guy staying around that long and doing so well. But our hats off to Keith Gutton, as it looks like it will probably come to an end this week. But then again, the Bears have got hot in the past, and you just never know with college baseball. Springfield Cardinals are back in town for a second week in a row. They've got Tulsa in town this week. We talked to Rob about Tink Hence, the outstanding Double-A pitcher for the Springfield Cardinals, who continue to lead the North Division of the Texas League, and thinking that maybe it's a Thursday or Friday start for Tink Hence this week. And so we may try to get over and catch him in action. I don't think he'll be here all season. I think he'll probably wind up in Memphis at some point helping the AAA team and continuing his path to try to get to St. Louis and help the big league pitching staff, which needs help right now too. High school baseball, we're in the playoff rounds with all the schools there. Continuing on this week with sectionals and state quarterfinals. Among the larger schools that are still playing, Glendale, Willard, and Logan Rogersville. So good luck to those teams. I know that Ash Grove softball is playing for a state championship this week. Good luck to them. Nixon Catholic are among the girls' soccer teams still playing. And then it's large school weekend in state track and field as they all head to Jeff City for the state championship. So good luck to all those athletes. Special guest today on Around the Ozarks Sports Scene is a veteran journalist from the St. Louis area. He's a Springfield native, Kickapoo High School graduate. We welcome Rob Raines to our podcast this week. Rob, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, Scott. Thank you.
You bet. How many books are we up to now? I know you've done several, and is there anything in the pipeline right now?
I think the grand total is 33.
Wow.
But nothing. Yeah, nothing at the moment. We've had a few ideas kicked around. With some, it's a lot harder to get a book published. Well, I'll say the two things. It's harder to get a book published the traditional publishing way than it used to be. Publishers a lot more. There are not as many publishers, and they're more kind of picky is not really a great word, but just kind of particular about what they publish. And then, there's obviously more opportunities to publish self-published books now than there've been in the past. But we've kicked a few ideas around, but nothing cooking right at the moment.
And, of course, busy with stlsportspage.com. Your website does a great job of keeping Cardinal fans up to date, all things St. Louis sports. That is the main baby in your life right now, is it not?
Correct. That's the day-to-day job that keeps us going. And it's been fun. We've done that about 12 years now. So since we've had the website, so it's changed a little bit, refined a little bit, but I think we've done a good job with it, and think people enjoy the stuff that we do, and we still enjoy doing it, which is the most important thing.
Highly encourage people to check it out for in-depth Cardinal coverage, and that's why we love to have Rob on, because he's on top of it like nobody else. And kind of we've talked in the past about journalism and the changing face of it, and I've got a freshman son kind of going into a version of that down at Arkansas, and the high school programs are starting to fire up again in different ways, a lot of multimedia. What is your kind of State of the Union address if younger people ask you now about getting into journalism?
Run the other way. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah. No, it's still a fun job. I mean, I still tell people all the time, that some people go to work and I go to a ball game. So I mean, I can't really complain about the job that I've had. I've been very lucky and very fortunate to do what I've done for as long as I've done it, and the fact that I still enjoy doing it. Yes, the business has changed. Yes, the baseball world has changed, but it's still great. I mean, there's a lot of different opportunities. The day and age when we came up, when the newspaper world was the driving force in the media business has changed. It's a digital world now, and we just have to learn to adapt to it. But the main message I have is that yes, the business may have changed. Yes, the way people get their news may have changed. They get it on their phone as opposed to instantaneously, as opposed to just waiting for the newspaper to show up on your driveway every morning. But somebody still has to get that information to you. So there's always going to be a role for somebody to be the messenger in that world, whether it's TV, radio, online, print, whatever, because they're not going to have 50,000 people at the ballpark going into the press box to ask, or the locker room to ask Ali Marmol a question or Sonny Gray a question. Somebody still has to be the guy to do that, or gal to do that, and get that information and relay it to the public. So the job may have changed, how you get the information may have changed, but somebody still has to do that job.
Yeah, and AI can't tell you if a guy has lost 2 miles an hour on his fastball in a game either, right? So that's always a plus, too.
Not yet. Not yet.
Yeah, let's knock on wood, and 10 years from now, that may be different, too. But let's talk Cardinals. They've been on a little bit of a heater here, won 6 of their last 8. Get to 21-26 overall. We're taping this on Tuesday. Nice win last night. Another good Sonny Gray start. They beat the Orioles, who are one of the better offensive teams in baseball right now. Kind of your State of the Union address, especially after what you've seen in the last week or so.
I would say my biggest thing is two things. One, I didn't think they had 9 less wins at the time we're talking than the Royals. I didn't see that happen.
Yeah.
And then number 2 is that I still think they have a lot of issues with the pitching staff. When I think that the offense is starting to come around a little bit. We knew it would. I mean, they were too good players, too talented players to have a year-long slump like that first 6 weeks or so of the season. So it doesn't surprise me that the offense is finally doing a lot better. I'm concerned more about the pitching staff. On the days that Sonny Gray doesn't start, they've really got a hard time winning. I mean, they were like, I think they're 9 games under 500 on days that Sonny Gray doesn't start. I mean, not just his record, but the team's record, or not just the starter's record, but the actual team record in those starts. So, I know they need a 5th starter. Have somebody start on Saturday night, against the Cubs. We don't know who that's going to be yet. But even the other guys, Lynn, Gibson, Michaelis, I don't think they pitched as well as the Cardinals expected them to pitch. So they're going to have to make a run here and get back up closer to the first place in the division. It has to start with the starting pitching. And,
you look at that division, and same thing as last year when we thought there's still time because there's not anybody that really runs away, except there wasn't enough time there when you only win 71 or whatever they finished with.
Yeah, the season didn't last till January.
Yeah, but you look at it, the Brewers are 27-20 here early in the week. The Cubs are 26-22. Both those teams have issues, just like the Cardinals. Is the most fortunate thing the fact that they're not in the East or the West? Where there's a Braves or a Dodgers or Phillies and teams like that.
Yeah. Oh, I definitely, no question. And we knew that going in. I mean, you knew that the Central was probably was by far the weakest division and the most available to teams to have a chance to win. You didn't have to be a great team, and I think that's what the Cardinals count on. I mean, and you can disagree with the philosophy if you want, but I mean, and I know it hasn't worked exactly the way the Cardinals had hoped it would the last few years, but I mean, you have two goals when you put a team together. It seems to me like, and I'm just talking, general terms or not specific terms, but you want to have a team that can either be good enough to win the division, get in the playoffs, and take your chances, which is what the Cardinals have always done, or you want to have a team that says this team has a chance to win the World Series. And of course, winning the division kind of is a foregone conclusion if you have a club like the Dodgers or the Braves or the Phillies. So to this point, the Cardinals have been reluctant to do that, and I think that's what a lot of the fans want, and that's where some of the frustration comes in. Was that we look at this team, the way they put this team together. I mean, okay, they go out and spend a lot of money on Goldschmidt, make a great trade to get him, spend a lot of money to get Arenado, even though Colorado, really helped to make that deal and put a lot of money into the deal. But their record with those two guys in the lineup in the postseason is 0-3. So, it's not exactly like they dominated the postseason. So, I mean, you get one of the division, you get in the playoffs, take a chance. Well, your chance is over pretty quick. the way it's been lately. So that's where I think some of the frustration kicks in.
Is a lot of it, too, that the perception that the money is there? I mean, you look at attendance, and I know it's dropped the last couple of years a little bit there, but, this is a franchise that's always had the means, it seems like, because of the turnstiles. And is that a large part of the frustration? And are the Cardinals cautious because of the whole Bally Sports thing, or is there any resolution to that on the horizon? Kind of explain that situation.
Yeah, I think there's two thoughts there. Number one is, there's no resolution at what the long term is going to be, whether, they always will continue to broadcast after this year or what. But I think there'll always be some model for the fans to get the games. I mean, how again, kind of like we talked about with the state of the journalism world, it's not the way it used to be. Well, the way you get the games may change in the future too, but there's still going to be a way to get those games on your television set. I don't think that's ever going to go away. I think the part of the money part of it is this. I don't think necessarily it's a question of how much money the Cardinals are spending. I think it's a choice of how they're spending it and where they're spending it. They could have, they could have gone out and gotten the other pitcher from Japan, not Yamamoto, but the other guy, the kid from Chicago, Imanaga, who's had an unbelievable start to the season. I think there was a real shot the Cardinals could have signed him this winter, but they just didn't pursue it as much as at least some people in the organization were not as gung ho on him as others, and he ended up going to the Cubs, and you're going to see him in St. Louis this weekend, but they're wearing the Cubby blue instead of a Cardinal red. Well, he would have made a big difference in this club. So I don't think it's necessarily the total amount of money that the Cardinals are spending. I think it's a choice of how they're spending. I mean, they could have taken the money that they signed Gibson and Wynn together and packaged it and spent less money and brought Jordan Montgomery back. So I mean, I think they have some choices to make, and they just to this point, they have to live with their choices, but the money, the actual amount of money that they're spending, I think is probably, comparable to what their revenues are, comparable to what the size of the market is. They're probably, the team payroll is probably in the 12th to 13th range in Major League Baseball, which is about where their total revenue sits as well. So that's probably right in line with what they should be spending. It's just a question of how they're choosing to spend it, in my mind.
And then you look at you talk about Jordan Montgomery, look at Jack Flaherty, and I think there was kind of a mutual. Would you say a mutual agreement that it was just time for a fresh start both ways there? Because, I mean, he's a guy that's gone on to Detroit and performed well now, too.
Yeah, probably so. In Jack's case, I mean, he probably had kind of a little bit worn out his welcome here. And you get tired, you get stale, you just need a new environment, a new challenge. The guy I think that they probably missed the boat on more than anybody else who's pitching well somewhere else is Jordan Hicks. Because I think that they just never really, they're going to tell you, oh, yeah, we gave him a chance to start. Well, no, you didn't. I mean, they kind of did the same thing with him that they're doing now with Libator. The Giants told him when they signed him in last November or whatever it was, okay, you're going to be a starter. He spent the whole offseason training to be a starter, went to spring training to be a starter, started the rotation, through spring training, started the season in the rotation. Well, the Cardinals didn't decide that Hicks was going to be a starter until the end of spring training after he pitched in the bullpen all spring. So how is that fair to him? And it's the saying that they make Libator a reliever in the end of spring training, and now they're asking him to try to fill in the rotation because Matt's got hurt again. So I think that's where I kind of have some questions with some of the things that they've done too. Is I would really like to have seen him give Hicks and or Libator a legitimate chance to start and to train and prepare to be a starter. Don't just kind of throw him into the mix and say, well, we gave him a chance, he didn't do it.
And the interesting thing with Hicks, too, is that the Giants have taught him that he doesn't have to throw it through a wall. I mean, his velocity's down, but his control's better, and he's able to go 6 innings now, and that's something the Cardinals either didn't see or just didn't try, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'd love to know what the bottom line was there about why they didn't. And I know they're going to say, well, yeah, he wanted to start, but well, you can't do everything. I mean, Tyler O'Neill wanted to play center field last year too, and they let him. They gave him a chance. It was a horrible disaster, but they tried. They let him try. So, I mean, you can't have if you trust your guys and you believe in your guys, and that's something they want to do, well, give them a chance, but don't just give them a halfway chance. Give them a legitimate time and effort to be able to see what they can do there.
One of the mysteries, too, of course, is Jordan Walker, a guy that Springfield fans here were enamored with during his Double-A time. He looked like the next star in MLB with the power-speed combo, big kid, smart kid, nice kid, very likable. I think the amazing stat of the year in Major League Baseball is actually in minor league baseball. We've played a quarter of the season, and this 6'6", 250 kid has yet to hit a home run. What happened with Jordan Walker?
Well, I think a couple things. I think he just hit a little bit of a wall there. I mean, I think, and I wrote a story about this a couple of weeks ago. I went down to Memphis, actually saw him and Victor Scott II and talked to them. And Matt Carpenter was down there on a rehab assignment too, and also got some input from Ryan Ludwig, who's one of the Cardinals minor league roving hitting instructors. And all of them talked about how they think right now, not just in the Cardinals case, not just in Walker and Scott's case, but just throughout baseball in general, that gap, especially the hitting gap between AAA and the big leagues, is the biggest it's ever been. I mean, look at Jackson Holliday, the number one prospect in baseball. Matt's kid, ready tearing up the minor leagues. The Orioles call him up and he goes 2 for 34, and they have to send him back. So it's just it's hard, and I think probably in Walker's case, the biggest thing probably was pitch recognition, swinging at pitches that he probably didn't really have a chance to hit. They always talk about, well, he needs to hit, stop hitting ground balls. Well, it's not so much stop hitting ground balls; it's just stop rolling over on a bad pitch and hitting the ground ball to third. You can hit the ball hard as long as it goes through the infield. But line drives are what they want, the gap to gap. And he probably hit more home runs last year than he probably should have last year, to be honest with you, because of the, as a first-year player, but really the Cardinals weren't playing anything, so that's just how he kind of, did his swing a little bit, and I think they tried to change that a little bit. One thing I do believe is, and people forget this, is how young he is. He won't turn 22 until next week, or later this week, I think it is his birthday, so he's, awfully far advanced for his age and to where he is now in his development, but power is always the last skill to come. So I don't really think you're going to get a true measure on how many home runs he potentially can hit in the big leagues until he's 24, 25 years old, and I think that's just kind of, we have to wait for that. So I think he's playing well in Memphis. He's getting more line drives. He's hitting the ball hard, and I would suspect he'll be back in St. Louis sooner rather than later. But then we'll just see what kind of adjustments he's made to. I'm not worried about the home runs. I think they're going to come, but let's just get the other aspects of his hitting. Stop swinging at those low and outside breaking balls that he doesn't no chance to hit.
Yeah, and I think I looked last night. I think he's hitting 315, maybe 320 in that range. So yeah, he has figured out how to put the ball in play and get base hits again too, which wasn't happening in St. Louis to start the year. But right. You look at this team, and I've got to believe it's more magnified because we're Cardinal followers and fans at the number of guys that have been involved in trades or just flat out released or whatever that have gone on to be stars elsewhere, and Adolis Garcia and Rosarina and Zach Gallen, and the list goes on there. These were guys that the Cardinals developed. Where would you put the Cardinals farm system right now compared to what it once was in the rankings among MLB teams? I haven't seen the latest to see where they've been, but haven't they been consistently back half here lately?
Somewhere like 15 to 20 range, I think. Yeah, especially after some of these guys have graduated, from the system. I don't know why they can't develop pitching. I mean, I just think you spent a lot of first round picks in the draft in recent years on college pitchers, major college pitchers that have had success in college, and for whatever reason they get to Double-A pretty quick, and down to Springfield there, and Graceffo, McGreevy, Derpy is not even there yet. For Zach Thompson, all those guys were first round picks, and none of them are pitching in St. Louis yet. So I mean, that's kind of a frustrating thing. Graceffo was not; he was a fifth-round pick, but yet he's kind of hit some injuries and kind of stalled a little bit. So that to me is I just don't know, and that's probably why they went out and got so many other pitchers in those deals last year. That trade deadline, like Roby and Roberson and Kloffenstein and those guys, simply because they didn't like the progression that their own pitchers were making. So there's two elements of it. There's the lack of pitching development, and then we've seen it too with right now. Ali Marmol basically has said, we started Livator because we didn't have any other choice. He was the best option we had. Well, it's kind of an indictment of your farm system is that you don't have one pitcher at AAA who can come up and make a couple starts at the big league level. So, that's the frustrating thing. And then the second thing is I shouldn't say never because never is a bad word, but it seems to me like, other teams get guys to the big leagues who are supposed to be really good prospects, and then they get better. Mm-hmm. The Cardinals get prospects who are supposed to be really good prospects who get to the big leagues and then don't get better. And that I didn't figure out why that is. Why they get the Carlsons, the Walkers, the Gormans, those guys that come up with all the hype and all the praise, and you think they're pretty good players, but they just never seem 3 or 4 years later you're looking at them and you go, well, they didn't get any better. What they got to the big league. So I haven't figured out the answer to that either. Yeah,
you look at it, and their three best players are guys they acquired in trades. With Goldschmidt, Arenado, and Contreras, and none of those guys were homegrown, and it just seems like when you look at the roster, you got a bunch of Jags, now just the guys, and I mean, and that doesn't mean they're not quality major leaguers, but they're not guys that like the Dylan Carlsons and the list kind of goes on and on there. And at what point does ownership kind of look and go, okay, what's going on from a organizational standpoint here, with our hitting coaches, our pitching coaches, and our managers and all that?
I think they will always evaluate that. I think that's constant. I should have mentioned a few of those guys that you mentioned too. I did kind of skated over that answer. Every one of those guys that have gone on to have success somewhere else, there's a reason why they were in a deal or whatever. I mean, Garcia, he didn't really get a chance to play, but don't forget that Texas DFA'd him too. I mean, 28 other teams could have had him at the same time, and then he went back to Texas. So nobody really kind of saw that coming. I mean, they saw that, a lot of the raw ability, but, I think his success has surprised them. Rosarena, they thought Livator was going to be, middle of the rotation at worst starting pitcher. So, and they had a lot of outfielders. So the guy that I think that they really messed up on more than any of the other recent people that they've traded was Zach Gallen, because I don't think they had to put him in the trade. I mean, they knew they had to trade Alcantara to get Ozuna. And they only had to get Ozuna because they had to have an outfielder, and Miami would only trade him. Well, they wouldn't trade Yelich before they would trade Ozuna. So you had to put him in the deal. But then Miami wanted another low minor league pitcher, and they happened to be mad at Gallen because of something that happened in the instructional league. So they said, put Gallen in the deal. I mean, they didn't have to do that. They could have given him anybody. So I think that's the guy that they didn't really know what they had that's kind of come back and bit them in the rear end a little bit. And I think the other problem they have right now is that from a management standpoint is I just think they've had so many trades that didn't work out in their favor. I think they're scared to make a trade. I think they're just gun shy of saying, okay, well, we know the next guy we trade is going to go win the MVP somewhere else, so they don't trade him. So I think that's you can't really manage scared. You can't really be a GM scared. I don't think. I think you just have to do a better job of evaluating your own talent and your holes and what you need to fix and go get them. I mean, that's maybe you need something to shake up this team a little bit. So.
Yeah,
we'll see.
Another guy like that, Nolan Gorman. I mean, you can't wait forever for him to hit over 200. Now he's got hot here recently, or hotter and stuff, but he's kind of still in that just a guy phase. He hit, I think, 28 homers last year because you need him to be consistent. Which brings up the question, when they're fully healthy, and they bring Jordan Walker back, are there still too many just a guys, and they're still going to try to play all of them from the Burlesons to the outfield glut out there and all the infielders? How do they solve that?
Well, they can still only play 9 guys at a time, including the DH. So some of them aren't going to play. I mean, don't forget about Tommy Edman. I mean, we haven't talked about him because he isn't even close to being ready to play. But at some point, he told me the other day we talked that he's still ways away. I mean, somebody said originally when he had the surgery, he was told it was going to be a 3-month recovery period, and then he found out afterwards it's going to be more like 9 months, according to somebody who's already had the same surgery. So
wow.
I don't know that you'll see him before, really before the All-Star break at this point. I thought at the beginning that he would be back by now or be almost back by now, and that's just not happening. So there's a guy that, not again, maybe more than just a guy, but probably better than some guys, in the league and can do a lot of things for you. So, I think that they miss him. Siani's been a pleasant surprise. I don't think they really had any idea that he would play the way he's played at this point. But yeah, they're for them to be a good team. I mean, the two. I wrote the thing before the season started about 10 things that questions the Cardinals have to answer for this season to go right. Number 1 is Sonny Gray has to be an ace, which I think he's pitched that way. But number 2 was, can Arenado and Goldschmidt hit? I mean, those are the 2 guys that you're hitting 3 and 4 almost every night in the middle of your lineup. They're the 2 guys that you're paying the most money to. They're the 2 guys that have to be the leaders of this club. And they've got 3 home runs each apiece. I mean, that's not getting the job done.
Do we see Tink Hence in St. Louis this year, or do you think they slow play it for development purposes because of what they've seen happen with a lot of the – now, I know we've talked about the hitting side with Jackson Holiday and those guys that have come up and struggled, but what about pitching, and how do you think they play the Hence card?
I would suspect you'll see him in Memphis more so than you'll see him in St. Louis. I just think they probably have a couple of guys that they would give that shot to. Again, it kind of depends on what you're looking for. I mean, do you want to start his clock, we'll just come up and make a couple of spot starts, or you want to wait and start him, if you get to September and you're out of the race, you bring him up then just to get his feet wet, kind of like they did with Mason Wynn last year in September, knowing that the results wouldn't be very good, but then he'll get the butterflies and cobwebs and, all that kind of stuff out of his head and be ready to go next spring. So that's a possibility. He's become a more consistent pitcher down there this year, which I like. They're giving him the chance to pitch deeper into ball games, work his way out of trouble a little bit, but he still has kind of some spotty stuff that he's still working on. So obviously, again, another very young guy, won't be 22 until August. So there's no reason to rush him at this point, and I think they'd have some other guys I probably would give that shot to first, just because because of the age and the experience factor.
Crystal ball, looking ahead, trade deadline. Are they buyers or sellers? I know that will depend on where they are in the standings, obviously, but will we say goodbye to Goldschmidt and is Jordan Walker moving to first base? Kind of give me your rundown on what you see maybe in a couple months.
I think Goldschmidt will depend on two things. One, I think it'll depend on what he wants to do. I don't think they would trade him against his will. If he says, I want to stay here, I think they would keep him here. But again, then also he's a free agent at the end of the year. So if you're keeping him at the trade deadline, does that mean you're going to also make him a free agent offer at the end of the season if you haven't already offered him a contract at that point at the trade deadline? So I don't know. I can see that going either way, and I think part of it's going to also depend on how he's playing. If he's going to get traded, it's going to have to be a team that's in contention for a playoff spot, and for a team to feel like he can help them in their push for the playoffs, he has to be playing a lot better than he's playing at this point. So I think that's still a wait and see question, I think. The guy that will get the most trade interest if they're out of the race in July or August is Ryan Helsley. He's just pitched tremendous. He's a free agent after next year. The Cardinals have never paid what a lot of clubs pay now for the going rate for a closer like that. So I think they'd have to have some serious conversations about if they want to think they're going to keep him beyond next year. Are they willing to make the $15 to $20 million a year commitment to a closer that they've never done before? So if they decide not to do that, then I think you could get a lot of people would be interested, not only because they'd have him for this stretch run, but have him for all next year too. So if you really want to kind of make a move that could kind of bring you 3 or 4 top, lower level minor league prospects in return, that's probably the guy you would look at trading.
Rob, before we wrap it up, the level of job security, safety for Mozeliak and Ollie Marmol, and I know I saw Mo's comments about at least his self-awareness is getting better about public sentiment for the job he's done here of late. Are those guys, if things continue and this little spurt isn't something that continues, do we see both those guys still with the team at the end of the year?
I think so. I don't think they're going to fire Mozeliak. I think DeWitt's, too loyal to him, to everything that he's done, and feels like he's shaped this organization for the last 2 decades. So I think that I can see where Mo would say, "Hey, I got to do something else. This isn't working. We got to do something else," and walking away and mutual decision to leave or something like that. But I don't think he would ever get fired before that contract runs out. I can see him leaving before the contract runs out, but I think it would be a combination of the two of them just sitting down and saying, "Hey, we got to have a fresh look at this here." So, and that would have to happen before any managerial change would happen. I don't see any way, if Mo is still calling the shots and still running the show, they're not going to change managers, because that would be a reflection again back on him. It would be 3 managers he's hired and fired in an 8-10 year span, and that's not good for the way this franchise has traditionally been run from a management standpoint. So, I can see if this season goes about as bad as last year does, that there will be some major changes made, but I don't think they would happen until after the season's over.
Very good. Rob, as always, great stuff. STLsportspage.com is the place to go find out all your Cardinal news, and we always appreciate your time.
Thank you, Scott. Appreciate it.
You betcha. We finish off each week with Scott's Thoughts, my ramblings and musings about things in the world of sports that have caught my eye, and we start out this week with the just bizarre report last Friday morning, almost like it was surreal. You had to go check and check the validity of it, but the Scotty Scheffler arrest in Louisville before the second round of the PGA Championship, and continuing to follow that situation. That he came out and shot, I believe, 5 under that day is simply amazing, given the fact that he was stretching in a jail cell to get ready for his morning tee time. But really, almost humorous that the Louisville prosecuting attorney there is continuing to pursue the charges against Scheffler, who is basically, it was like Wally Cleaver getting arrested for something. One of the really good guys out there, and a misunderstanding in the entire situation. Had an overzealous police officer that maybe went over the line with a guy that was just trying to get to his job, and so hopefully that will be remedied soon. But it's just ridiculous if this drags on any longer for the world's number one player in professional golf. And congrats to Xander Schauffele. I'd kind of dogged him in the week earlier about not being able to finish rounds. He was the holder of the dubious distinction of best player never to win a major going into the PGA, and he wins it and really fought off some of the hot golfers in the game down the stretch there with his own great play. So congrats to the X-Man, Xander Schauffele, there on his first major. I believe that probably hands that torch of best player never to win a major on to Victor Hovland now, who is hot on the heels of Xander at the PGA down the stretch. The Caitlin Clark effect continues. Watching TV earlier this week, I saw that her Indiana team was on the tube, WNBA game. I actually switched over, and probably the first WNBA game I've watched in years. Just kind of flipping back and forth, but I did see enough time to where Caitlin Clark got stripped at midcourt, reached in and fouled, and then walked by the official and dropped an F-bomb and got a technical. So it's very clear that the WNBA, not only the veteran players who maybe will grow tired of hearing about Caitlin Clark before the season's over, are they going to get their licks in, but the officials are not going to take any lip from the rookie. So it'll be a learning experience for Caitlin as she goes on in the WNBA continuing on this year. Congratulations quickly to Reagan Zabilski, the Springfield Catholic golfer down at the University of Arkansas. The Arkansas team got the NCAA championships and finished 10th. Good sophomore year for Reagan. I think she finished with a 74 in the final round, her best round of the meet there. So big things ahead for her. And I'm also looking forward to this time of year because it's College World Series time for college baseball. We love watching and softball for that matter too. I kind of get into the World Series when it hits Oklahoma City and see those great teams. But the baseball World Series, you look at our local teams and regional teams. Arkansas's got the best shot of maybe making some noise. They've got the best pitcher in the country in Hagen Smith, the junior left-hander who will be the number one pick in the MLB draft in July in terms of pitchers. But Arkansas's got to figure out who the other starters are to go with Hagen and also get the offense more consistent because they're in the SEC tournament this week down in Hoover, Alabama. It's kind of one of those deals that there are a lot of teams that are in that top 10 in the national poll, which the SEC has probably 6 or 7 of them, that really don't care if they get beat in the SEC tournament because it means more rest for the NCAA regional that most of them will be hosting there. So it'll be interesting to see what the Hogs can do down the stretch for veteran coach Dave Van Horn. It's going to do it for this week's edition, episode 30 of the Around the Ozarks Sports Scene. Big thanks to our sponsor, Fast Break Sports. If you're into sports cards, collecting, memorabilia for your man cave or woman cave, go visit Fast Break Sports. They're just south of Campbell and Battlefield there in that Burger King, the next little strip center. Go see Fast Break Sports for all your sports collectibles and memorabilia needs. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.